Welcome to what is the final Hyde Lecture of the year. I think the year's gone very quickly, I'd have to say, but so this year the lecture series has been asking a question: what is next for the disciplines? And so the series of speakers that we've brought in have been in various different ways exploring alternative futures for our disciplines, whether it's architecture, interior design, or landscape architecture. And I think after going through and seeing many speakers from different points of view, I think it's really important that we continually ask what's next. It's not simply a matter of defining a future and then finding a stable future for our fields, but constantly asking what is next, what are the issues that we have to face and deal with, and what ways can we bring sort of new thinking to our disciplines as we deal with the disruptions that we're addressing in the professions, but also at the university and in the disciplines themselves. And I think if you talk to professionals, there's certain issues that they're dealing with. If you talk to academics, there's other issues. So we're really facing a lot of change, and I think it's a very intense time right now for all of our disciplines. And so it's been an exciting opportunity to look at the work of a variety of different people and the way that they approach their own particular sort of inroad into the discipline. So today I'm pleased to introduce Marklee. He's a principal of Johnston Marklee and Associates, which is a Los Angeles-based architecture firm. They've been engaged in a range of institutional, residential, and commercial projects in the United States, as well as in Argentina, Chile, Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, and Italy. And the office only opened in 1998, so that's quite a range of places for a small and young, relatively young office to be working. Adopting an interdisciplinary design approach, the firm explores emergent design strategies and solutions for architecture and urbanism. And the firm's won numerous awards, including the 2002 and also 2012 Progressive Architecture Design Award, an American Architecture Award from the Chicago Athenaeum, several awards from AIA Los Angeles and the AIA California Council, and in 2014 the firm was nominated for the Mies Prize, which is a very prestigious award. The work has been published widely, including in a book called Later Layer that addresses the collaborations with artists and the art world, with architects, of course. And then later this year, a new book, House is a House is a House is a House, I think I said that enough times, will be published by Berkhauser this year. I think it's April, so very soon. So watch out for that. And then there's also a monograph published in 2014 in 2G, which is a really nice publication. So combining his academic and design expertise, Marklee conducts speculative research on critical reassessments of architecture and urban design history, developing theories on urban development and housing at border cities, culture-specific topological landscapes, and new design strategies in material form and technology. He's written and lectured widely on this work. With his partner Sharon Johnston, Marklee is taught at Princeton, at the Princeton University School of Architecture, at Harvard's Graduate School of Design, at Rice University, where they held the Cullinan Visiting Professorship. Mark is also taught at the ETH in Zurich and Technical University of Berlin, and at UCLA from 1998 to 2008, where he served as vice chair of the Department of Architecture and Urban Design. So please welcome Marklee, and look forward to a great talk.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you, Jeffrey, for the invitation and the generous introduction. We did work abroad quite a bit in the last 10 years, but we worked abroad because we had to. We're not like the Spanish who went out and conquered. We're more like the Portuguese who had no food at home when we had to go out. But it actually happened strangely right before the crisis. I prepared a lot of images, so I'm going to show them very quickly, like a machine gun today. I think the question, what's next, is a difficult question. I think it's very hard for one to be conscious and forecast while being cognitive of what's happening within the field. I'm always impressed by Louis Kahn's famous aphorism, what will be has always been. I think the phrase that has always been alludes to history, alludes to essence and beginning of things. But maybe what will be is that phrase is a little bit more deterministic, almost like prescribe what will come in an a priori sense. So I think the term we like to use is what becomes will always be. For us, history is very important in our work. Typology is very important in our work. Not from an old sense or in a Beaux-Arts sense where if you do a cruciform house, cruciform building, you have to follow such and such rules. But for us, typology is something that has been, it's knowledge that has been accumulated and accrued over many years. A lot of intelligence is built in that. And we try to deal, when we do projects, we try to deal with current conditions, but we try to approximate that typology. So oftentimes the type is not present in the very beginning of the design process, but as it evolved, we begin to see the type coming, like a cross or a double house, a tower and such. So these are some images of some of our projects. Some were built, some were not, but sometimes we try to distill it down to a single image and try to capture the essence of the project. So today I would like to show a cross-section of our work from the last 18 years. I'll show some work that was completed quite a while ago and some projects that we've just started. So it's not quite gelled together yet, but I think that way maybe you can see an array of the things that we are tackling. The first house I'd like to show is it's the Hill House. It's finished 11 years ago. It's situated on a very a steep and uneven hillside, very close to the Pacific Coast Highway, and not far away from the Eames house, the Charles and Ray Eames house. And it was the last virgin lot on that street. And the reason that it was not built on was because it's a substandard lot, and the Hillside Ordinance of Los Angeles tried to discourage overbuilding on hillside. So when we start working on the project, we get a book of drawings like the ones you see on top that determines the maximum building height at any given point. So rather than seeing it as a policing constraint, we thought maybe there's some design opportunity in it. So equivalent to what Hugh Ferris did in the 20s when he began to visualize New York as a crystalline city built based on its setback or zoning envelope. So step by step, we begin to model, the three-dimensional maximum buildable volume of the house. At the same time, we wanted to minimize the footprint because a lot of the cost of construction it goes into the ground on hillside houses. So the caissons in this house is as tall as the house itself, like a tree with very deep roots. So certainly this is a house that's been designed from outside in because the challenge was to build a house of a certain size. It's a spec house that would be right for the market but fit within a substandard lot. So after we had the massing, we wanted to preserve this tension between maximum and minimum to the apertures or the windows. So we tried to exaggerate the size of the windows or the openings that are facing the view and minimize the windows that are facing the neighbors or the side. So on the street side, actually, there aren't any windows at all because it's also a busy street with a lot of traffic. So from the street side, it seems like a 1.5 story house. And then and when you enter, because we have built to the maximum buildable envelope, we couldn't have any balconies or projecting roofs. So at the end, you have this indoor-outdoor relationship with the exterior by these, on each of these panels, you have 3 8-foot wide glasses that glass doors that completely open up. But it's very different from the 1950s case study, Craig Elwood or Pierre Koenig type of indoor-outdoor space where the floor extends beyond the glass. It's really a custom house for this lot. Because it's tapered, actually the house, the lower floor is all built out of concrete, it's half buried. The 2 inclined planes are actually perpendicular to the natural slope. And then the floor above is actually in tension, holding it back. The very first job I had as an architecture intern was following this architecture photographer, and he was photographing a 52-story building in Hong Kong, and he was standing on the ledge, then leaning out, and two people behind him were holding his pants back. I was like stunned. But I think that it's a similar structural model. everything above the lower floor is built out of steel. But we didn't want to expose the steel because as we were designing the project, the earthquake code at that moment, 97, made it, we had to use a lot more steel, a lot of diagonal bracing, everything is much heavier. And being like 100 yards away from the Eames house, we thought if we expose the steel, this would look like a steel house on steroids. So the only sense that you have that this is a steel house is the large cantilever or the lack of intermediary support in the center. So even the stairs, in a way, suspended from the beam above. Because the house was designed so three-dimensionally, we didn't want to have one material for the roof and another material for the walls. So we found this Grail coat, which is a waterproofing cementitious material that has fiber in them that expands slightly. It's slightly flexible, so it doesn't need any expansion joints like stucco. So we covered the entire house with this material. I think this project for us also has some faciality aspect about this house. And some windows are really pushed up against the house, and then some windows are really set back. So it creates a certain depth. When we did the massing, we were so excited. We did it for the entire block and showed it to the planning department. This is what you get for your hillside ordinance, but they were much less amused than we were. Another interesting story was we still do collages. Sometimes collage for us to quickly get a sense of the essence of the project. And this collage was published before the house was built. And someone said, well, you should show Julius Schumann this project. And he was 94, 95 at that time, and still alive. And my friend said, well, they can sue you for copyright infringement. So we met with Julius, and Julius looked at the project and said, oh, I won't sue you if I can come and shoot your house. So it's interesting for us because when we do these type of collages, for us it's like thinking about the importance of the continuity of the profile. Certainly this image has been an icon for post-war Southern California living in the US, and sometimes we ask, like, how much did the architecture play a role in that image? Maybe we can take away the canopy, we can take away the foreground, and distill the essence of the image down to just this corner condition in relationship to a distant view. So these are pictures of Julius from 2005. So it's interesting in a way that we use his photography as a design, means of design, and then he documented the picture again. Like some of them are his furniture. Like this is his Anne Jacobsen chair, and you see how he asked his assistant to position the chair so the curvature just catches the run of the stairs. And also he brought in a lot of his own furniture and also a lot of artificial lighting. The second project is in Argentina, in Rosario, which is about 3 hours north of Buenos Aires. And it's situated in a relatively new development. We are commissioned to build a house, and when we started the building, there was nothing around. So it has this Philip Johnson glass house type of sense. But we know that in the future, 2 of the 4 sides will be occupied. So when we design the house, we try to preemptively think about where the future houses will be and position the windows so that it won't look towards the future houses. So it has a very simple spiral circulation through the house, and you end up in a roof terrace. And every time you turn, I think we try to frame the view quite differently before you get to the top and see the entire view again. This is the first time we worked outside of the country, so we're not familiar with the abilities of the contractors and the construction culture there. So we did it there's a desire for a quite dynamic building sitting in the corner. So the primitive is a simple marriage of an eclipse and a box. And we did 4 cuts. 2 of the cuts are straight, plain cuts on a singular curved surface. And then 2 of the cuts are fragments of a sphere. We thought that if they could build the formwork of a sphere, they could easily build the formwork of a fragment of that. So in a way, I think the windows, the apertures for us work with the shape of the house in a way you don't really have a front facade. You always wants to rotate and turn around. So You can see the relationship of the windows to on the left-hand side, you see a straight cut, or in the diagonal plane on a single curved surface. Upper right is the a fragment of a sphere. So behind the sphere, we try to bring in natural light to supplement the light that's coming into skylights to supplement the lights that are coming in from the window. So you walk all the way up to the roof. I think in contrast on the exterior, which is heavier, we tried to create a much more lighter interior. See the double height space, and then you walk up to a mezzanine, and then you see the windows that are pushed in versus the windows that are pushed out. This is a diagram of the promenade, how the cuts are always adjacent to one of the windows. So as you can see in the upper left image, you see a window, you see a cut, you have this type of checkerboard relationship. And then this is when it was finished, you can see the skylight coming in, or the other fragment of the sphere is cut where the dining room is. So we use it as a reflector for the artificial lighting. This project took so long to build, so there are other houses that were built way before we finished. I think here you begin to see a window that is pushed in. I think for us the importance of the continuity of the curve, but also pushing in the window creates shade for the mezzanine area as opposed to windows that are right on the surface. So you end up the circulation in the door, you exit, you walk up these stairs, and then you end up in the pampas, and then you see the entire view again. The best comment we got from this building was a blogger who said this looks like the love child between Mario Botta and a septic tank. So I don't know if you find that funny, but it was very funny for us. And then this house is, this is the vault house, and this house was built in Oxnard. We finished this a few years ago, and Oxnard is between Los Angeles, closer to Santa Barbara. And like many beachfront houses or beachfront lots that's quite ubiquitous in Southern California, is that the lots are very long and narrow, and most people put their living room here and the master bedroom up there, which are great for those rooms, but then the rest of the house is very dark and quite undesirable, and oftentimes you have to walk quite unceremoniously between buildings and enter in a quite an awkward way. So the lot that we have is there's empty next to it, but we know that in the future there will be a house. So it sticks out a little bit. So the first thing we did was we want to put a large courtyard as an entry courtyard at the darkest part of the house, so you could bring a lot of light into that part. And the second thing we wanted to do is to figure out a way to bring as much view, light and air into the deepest part of the house. So in this case, we gave each room a shape, which is a barrel vault, and they're all facing the direction of the beach, and they're open on the two ends. So this is a conceptual model of the house. So in a way, the organization of the house is like a microcosm. It's packed like sardines too, but they don't overlap. So these are some early diagrams. When you cut a series of transverse sections, sometimes you see a double height space, sometimes you see a single height space, but they all have its own spatial definition. And I think the goal for us is to bring, when you're even almost at the end of the house, when you're 3/4, 4/5 into the end of the house, you still get a sense, you still see the beach and the ocean. Because the house is built on this tsunami zone, so part of the house have to be raised in case a tsunami comes, the houses together won't form a dam, so the waves could go underneath the house. So we use the same type of construction, vaults to lift up the house. You have a double height living room space, a master bedroom that has to look through the living room to see the ocean, and then behind the master bedroom you see the courtyard. This is all built out of concrete with concrete piles. Everything above is built out of steel. So when I show this project in Europe, my colleagues will roll their eyes because this is not stereoatomic construction. This is not built out of stone or concrete. But then I say, welcome to America. I think for us, it's certainly the vault has a lot of history in its ontological construction, where it came from. But I think for us, it's purely spatial in this case. I think the poché spaces, it's steel up here, so we actually have cross bracing. And in between the cross bracing, we don't need moment connections, and then in between we have all the HVAC ducts. So as you can see, we work a lot with physical models. We try to study the model and define the character of the rooms. And we also like these accidents, like in the master bedroom, looking out to the living room. Sometimes the incoherence between a larger vault with a smaller vault. So these happy accidents. And then there are some unhappy accidents, like suddenly there are two Gothic arches that happen here. The side facing the street is actually quite contextual with the Spanish colonial houses. You drive by, this could be a house maybe in the Outer Flows or Irving Gilson's, of these modern Spanish colonial houses. With the exception, we don't have, the arches are always volumetric for us, so it's never just an arch, so it's always a vault. We even use the vault to carve open to make the path between us and the future house wider, so it's a more generous path before you enter into the courtyard. And in contrast to the beach side, it's much more porous. This was when it was just finished, and we can also see a skylight that's coming from the roof. This is the street side, and so you enter, you walk up to the middle of the house, and then you walk up a few steps, and then you walk into this courtyard. So on one side, you see the gym or the library, and then on the opposite side of this view, you enter into the house and you see the dining, kitchen, and the master bedroom on the upper right. And then you end up in this two-story space. This is a sculpture, so not a human scale. You look back, then you see the master bedroom. I want to say something about the clear story lights. Why did we turn it upside down? We tried having it right side up at first to keep the language of the vaults consistent. But at the end, when you have a vault coming in a transverse direction, you end up with a groin vault. So by flipping it upside down, actually, it opens up the space and brings more natural light in. And we know that in the future, there will be a house next to it. So this is more for light than for view. Here you see the skylight coming down from above. This is the view from the master bedroom. And this is the view when you have your back up against the two bedrooms. So you're pretty deep into the house. You look through the courtyard and through, but you still see the beach and the ocean. Another detail of this upside down vault. And then behind that with the skylight for the two rooms. I think one thing I'd like to mention is after the experience with Julius Schumann, we were very interested in how after we finish a work and someone else have a different perspective, we'll begin to capture or record the work very differently. So besides having architectural photographers to photograph our work, sometimes we invite artists to do it. So in this case, the photographer, Jack Pearson, came and did a series of photographs of the profile of the vault house. Or the artist Louisa Lambry, who were interested in details. She came and did a series of photographs of the corner of the Hill House. Or James Welling, great photographer and a great teacher. He did this whole series called Light Series. And he came to another project, the Porch House, and began to take pictures of the skylights. This is an earlier project we did. It's the Sail House, where we invited Livia Corona, and New York-based photographer. And we said, you don't have to deal with the house at all. The house can be a backdrop to your story. And she was interested at that time with aging and gerontology in Venice, where the house is situated. So she came and she created a portfolio, a narrative of a story. And where she had these actors and she hired furniture. And she was completely into the mathematics of the house, which was attached to one of Morpheus's early project, 2468. So in the photographs, there's always 1, 2, 4, 6, or 8 characters in them. Marian Müller from Switzerland, who took up projects and paired with other pictures of Los Angeles. So this is the house that Jeff talked about. This is the book that Jeff talked about that's coming out, that we try to combine some of these artists' rendition of our work together with 6 conversations with architects and historians, artists and colleagues that we find inspiration. This is Walid Beshti, or this is Jim Wellings and Jack Pearson's. I think the first 3 projects we showed, you get a sense of the importance of view and how view is important to our project. This is the very first project we ever did. We only worked on it for 1 week and then we were fired. And we actually forgot about this project. But recently we read Francois Truffaut said, like, for a young filmmaker, the first 150 feet of film, your character is already in there. So we dug out this project. And it's a little freestanding pavilion in Ann Arbor. On one side it faces a creek, on the other side it faces a valley. So what we did was we took a picture window and we situated horizontally to face the river, and we flipped it 90 degrees vertically to face the valley. And we basically combined it, and that's it. And what we did was, you see a plan and an elevation. We used one curve, and we juxtaposed the curve in plan and section. So I think in many ways, perhaps it foretold some of the things that we were interested in late afterwards, which were the repetition of singular elements and used in different ways, or perhaps a certain preference or predilection for edges over surfaces. A few years ago, we were invited with 10 other architects to design a pavilion in Chile after the second largest earthquake. And these pavilions will be used to serve the local community during the reconstruction period, which is more than 15 years. And then after the reconstruction period, it will be used as a gallery space where exhibitions could travel from one area to another. So our site is situated on a bluff overlooking this really beautiful Half Moon Bay, and in the middle of a pine forest. So it's a very powerful site, but it's a very small program with 3,000 square feet. So what we did, the first idea was that why don't we double the house, like build a building and then have a negative, a void building. And you always have to walk into the void. So it evolved into the model on the right. And this is the scheme. Basically, there are 2 semi-ellipse shapes, and one is basically faces up to the sky, and the other faces to the ocean. We think no matter what this is used for, there's the auspices of the project has something to do with disaster and memorial. So we wanted to have this kind of courtyard that's kind of a quiet space to purge, before you go into see the view again. So it's a very simple plan. One ellipse is closed, one ellipse is open. This is a model. We lift the roof, and then all the spaces in between we put storage and all the ancillary spaces, the bathrooms and such. So you enter from the courtyard in an axis, and then you enter into the room. So this is one of the early models. This is a collage we did. We even want to leave the ground as it is. So the only construction is just the wall itself. We have to remove a few trees, so we wanted to use the trunks of the trees as the formwork for the entry courtyard. So because you walk through the forest, so you have a sense of the dimension of the forest, you have a sense of the cadence, the rhythm. So when you walk into the space again, it's again the rhythm of the trunks of the trees that form this kind of scalloping formwork. And then in contrast, when you walk into the interior room, we wanted it to be almost like a mirrored finish. So although it's a half ellipse, you have a sense that it's a panorama. So we just propose a very polished concrete, not that it has to be mirrored, but we think when you walk into a semicircular room or semi-ellipse room, you always are captured by the view. So what brings you back you understand that you're in a room that's like a theater. We just thought if the horizon line comes in, and you see it on both sides. So you have a sense that you're being surrounded by this horizon. So in a way, then you have a sense of the shape, but you also look out and you see the Half Moon Bay. So I think there's something that we try to create in this type of a very simple building, really. And all the dynamics happen in plan, and it's just a very simple extruded volume. Lost this image, but no problem. That project took a long time. It's going to start construction end of this year. But meanwhile, we were invited to do a pavilion in Shanghai for this architecture biennial, where there will be an exhibition, but afterwards they want to leave the building for other purposes of which we do not know. So we took the same idea of these semi-ellipse shapes, and we put 6 of them together, aggregate 6 of them together. 3 of them are facing out, that frames different views, and then 3 of them faces in and form a courtyard. So in a way, it's a model of a house, like something that's very extroverted versus something that is much more introverted. Shanghai, the bun is changing very quickly. So you see, this is our pavilion. This is a pavilion by Young Ho Chang, and there was others were scattered all around along the riverfront. This will be a museum that a site for a museum that David Chipperfield will build, so the entry is always between these edges, and then you walk into a space, and then you see the view. We also try to bring in natural light in to supplement. And then after the Biennale, it turned into the Shanghai Center for Photography. So if we would have known, we wouldn't have that many curved walls. But plan-wise, it's very similar. I mean, I think it grows out of our Chilean project. I mean, I could imagine working in China is not, being someone from Hong Kong, I thought it would be easier, but it's not easy at all. And a lot of things that were lost in communication. I was there the day before it opened. There are 30 people working on the site. I said, there's no way. It took another month before this is done. But then the next day it was finished. And they said, welcome to China's speed. So sometimes the building seems very diminutive or much smaller. And sometimes when you come from a different angle, it's much larger and it spreads out. This is a project for the UCLA Graduate Studio Arts Program, and they are not located on campus, but they're located in Culver City. So those who know LA, Culver City is an area where it used to be a light industrial area, a lot of movie industry were there. Architecturally, the last 30 years, Eric Owen Moss did a lot of his very expressive structures all the way around. And UCLA had the graduate studio in this building, which are beautiful 1950s bowstring truss building. But over the years, there are other buildings that have been added on, and there are a lot of issues with the condition of the spaces, the changing of levels, and the lack of spaces. So what we did was first thing we did was we proposed to purge all the barnacles around the existing building and return back to the original building, take the base that's raised 3 feet and then extend it, and take the concept of the roof and expand it, and then take the facade that's there and expand it. So almost no design. We just take what is there and repeat it. So at the end, then within this larger complex, there are some spaces that we allude to urban spaces. So there's the arcade, we call the arcade, we call the courtyard, we call garden, we call the sculpture courtyard. So this is a model, this without the roof, this is the existing building with a bowstring truss. And then these are the new bowstring truss that we're adding. And then the whole thing is covered by a polycarbonate roof. Some of the spaces are conditioned underneath, some of the spaces are not. I think there was a desire in terms of the school to have this countenance of a very simple industrial building in relationship to all the creative offices that are moving around there. So even the entrance, you have to walk around to see. And a very, very simple facade. You enter from the side, and then through the arcade, there will be a garden. This is the old building that we renovated, but we introduced a new skylight. This is the crit room. This is the sculpture space. There's a type of grittiness or roughness or brutalness within the art school that they try to, this ethos that they try to preserve. Another project this is a project in Chicago next to Washington Park. This is a competition that we just won for the Green Line Arts Center. And Chicago, this whole area, a lot of property were owned by University of Chicago. And in the last few years, the artist and professor there, Theaster Gates, has been actively transforming a lot of the houses around the neighborhood and instilled a lot of art programs for the neighborhood as well as for the university. So these are some of the examples, the bank that has been transformed, all these activities and debates that are being hosted there. So this building that we're doing is one of them. So it's situated on a larger parcel that they own, and then this is a building that they already renovated, and then this is the building that we are renovating and putting in 2 theaters adjacent to the Green Line, this raised train track. And we propose to preserve the facade. Now, the facade has a lot to do with the history of the place, although as you can see, it's all sealed off. And we introduced a new roof. We looked at a lot of industrial roofs or this type of gable roofs that you see in vernacular scale as well as in industrial scale and cover the building. So we even extended the gable roof into the adjacent site as a covered area. So I think it's something that is both familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. So the inside of the building is really 2 theaters with 2 courtyards. So 2 courtyards, they're more like greenhouses, they're closed. But we're proposing a series of doors that could open and close. So this is used as a theater, this cinema, this is used as a black box theater, and then these are these unprogrammed spaces. So sometimes they are isolated, and when the doors are open, then this could all be connected. So on the street front, this is the preserved facade, and then this is the upper floor, the sawtooth that we're adding, and then on the ground floor, you begin to see through the building. The back side, so you see the other courtyard extending out. So this is when you're in the first room, when the doors are open, and then this you're in the first greenhouse courtyard, and then you enter into another black box theater, and then the next courtyard. So in a way, the courtyard is more connected to the exterior of the backside of the project. And then we can also foresee how this type of roofing system could begin to proliferate and create this other building that for the future of the site. I just want to show you some of the collages that we've done. I think, I think for us, like this one, we talked about the importance of the corner. This one was another Julius Schumann shot from the Neutris house, but we're interested in the kind of extreme flatness versus depth. Or this is from Giuseppe Tarani's Casa de Fascio for Italian project. This was a shot from Marcel Breuer's house in the courtyard of MoMA. This was the Friedrichstrasse, Mies van der Rohe building, Barcelona for a project in Hawaii. Later on, we ventured into these images from film series. I don't know, I think there's always something interesting for us about history. I think no matter if you're a first-year student or you have been around for a long time, like no matter what you do, you measure up against history. Right? Even you're new in architecture, I think your project, you want to measure up to your favorite building. And I remember David Lee Roth, does it ring a bell, with Van Halen? David Lee Roth once said, I'm doing a new album and I want this album to be so hot that when I put it back on the shelf, it will burn all the other albums. It's certainly competitive, but I think that's this kind of interesting moment of measuring up against history. This is from the Contempt from the movie, or this is a collage for the Menil courtyard, and such. And then some of these were, both the photographs and the collages were shown at the Architecture Biennial. So the last part of the talk, I wanted to show some projects. I think one of the things we did early on is we get to work next to kind of important houses. Like in this case, this is an old photograph from 1934 of Richard Neutris' Stenhouse. So this was, Neutris just came from Berlin. It was before his mature years when he had the spider leg columns or the corner windows that are more his signature work, but he still had this kind of semicircular shape that he used on another project, and he also used when he worked with Eric Mendelsohn in Berlin. So we were commissioned just to do an accessory building to it. And we're interested in how we can almost echo that curve and form like a bookend to define the space in between. So on one hand, it's a curve facing the building. On the other hand, on the other hand, it's actually cut. So I think for us, it's creating this kind of dialectic between the old and the new building. Or in another case, this was the one I talked about earlier. Morphus's one of the first projects, the 2468 house from 1978. And we dug into Morphus's archive and found this drawing where Tom and Michael were proposing that the building is proliferated. And every time it proliferates, it turns, similar to the logic of how the window rotates. So we don't have that room. We only have one lot. So we actually, the lower middle diagram was the partie where we multiplied the house conceptually, took the same dimensions, but at the end create a courtyard and a solid space. So in a way, there was a main house that was attached to the morphosis building, and there's this kind of understatedness of the main house that we try to replicate, where while we respond to the dimensions of the 2468 house. So you see a 4x4 window, but we push it to the edge, or we slightly enlarge this window. You can see the depth versus the flatness of the facade. But I think those projects that we dealt with historical buildings, I think taught us to deal with other buildings that we have, scale of projects that we are facing right now. I'm going to show, I only have 3 more projects. I'm going to show you it quite quickly because some projects we haven't really, we just started. So the first one is the Museum of Contemporary Art by Arata Isozaki in 1986. When it was built, it was like a dry dock on the land. And these are some of Isozaki's drawings, these silkscreen drawings. And then it was really envisioned as a cluster of buildings that form a small village. These are all his silkscreen. MOCA has a really incredible art program. You can see the artists responding to the museum, like Klaus Oldenburg or Barbara Kasten. These are the photographs of the building when it was built. It was really like nothing around. But what happened in 1986 has changed. Like this is today. So with the completion of Dilys Scafidio's Broad building, which is here, the context has already been completed. Compared to the master plan that Arthur Erickson did, what is built today is actually quite different. So how do you deal with MOCA nowadays? Now, in relationship to the Grand Avenue that it sits, in relationship to all the other cultural institutions. This is what it was, and this is what it is now. So what was shown as a kind of minimal, De Chirico-esque silk screen with these long shadows are cluttered with a lot of things, with signage, with buildings, with these cafe tables and umbrellas, brise-soleils and all. So what we propose is actually, it's a strategy of reduction and addition, almost like acupuncture. We propose to remove a canopy that was built later. We propose to add a wall, so that really defines the courtyard. So things that are beyond the courtyard, the fountains and the cafe that are not part of the museum will be closed off. We're still with an opening, but the spaces are more defined. And then we propose to take away the ticket box and actually create a much more smoother path as you enter to this plaza space. Second thing we propose is to take the take the cafe below and switch it with a bookstore. So enlarge the space and have a more defined sculptural courtyard before you enter. And then we also propose to change the whole entry lobby, as well as the space below. So this was the circulation before, like somehow the fountain, the cafe, and things that have nothing to do with MOCA. And then this is what we think will be after. So basically it's a much more contained space and much more clearer way of circulation. So this is what's before, and this is what's after. So you see the wall being closed. This is what's before, like looking at this arch, and then this ticket booth, and sometimes there's a line here blocking the entrance to here, to the plaza, and this is what will be after. So in a way, we try to do something that is not imposing something on, but almost doing a tailor fitting to Isozaki's building. This is what's after, with the new bookstore. This is looking in the courtyard where the restaurant is now, and this is what will be after. The ticket booth area, we propose to open up the wall so it's more connected to the stair beyond. This is the ticket area again, and how there's a much larger opening and a larger wall to announce the show. So that was the first phase. The first phase is really an act of removal, act of addition, and then the next phase that we're studying right now is to add more gallery spaces. So this is early in the studies, like after we finish the first phase, where could the galleries be added? Because also, it's very difficult to convince someone to put money into the building and not add more art spaces. So this is what it was after the first phase. This is the second phase. So another project is in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. It's a building finished in 1996 by Joseph Paul Kleihues, the German architect. It's situated in the park, and it has a park in front and extends all the way to Lakeshore Drive. So on one side, it's in between Lakeshore Drive and Michigan Avenue. It's a very Germanic museum. It has a very tight 24-foot grid. You see the facade of the facade drawings by Kleihues. It's not very well liked. I think it's considered very stern and uninviting. You have to walk up these stairs, and the backside, the garden space is cut off by these different terraces. However, the gallery spaces are very nice. Like this is the permanent collection gallery. This is the temporary collection. Also, this atrium space that different type of exhibitions are held there. And this is a kind of a signature Joseph Clayhughes ship-shaped stairway that is also permeating through the gallery. Now, what we find strange are these double height spaces that are perpendicular to the atrium spaces that somehow when you walk in, you feel very compressed and also take away the drama from the atrium. So these are the two spaces that we think in the future we could add on to. But the facade, you can see, this is B.H. Stroiley's work that always had been used for artist installation. So we wanted to, diagrammatically to connect more the east and west sides, how to make the base more porous, and also to fix the circulation, to improve the flow. So this is before, so people backtrack a lot, and then this is after. So you can walk directly towards the end. We built another ship-shaped stair, slightly different. So this is what the ground floor space is. This is what's after. So you see natural light coming in, you get closer, and then you walk up to the second level. This is what's before, and this is after, when you add another stair to go up. And cross-section wise, you can see the two double height spaces on both sides, and then we propose to build new floors and new program there. This is the upper floor with before, and then with the new program, then the gallery is connected on both sides. So it's a symmetrical building, but asymmetrical in the interior, and a lot of backtracking. So these are the spaces. This is what we propose. And then at the biennial, we actually did an installation where it's called a grid as a grid as a grid as a grid as a grid, where we did a grid of Clayhughes grid and build the ceiling and project the grid back onto the facade graphically. So you see actually where the grid collapses. Lower floor, this is the first phase. And then these are some of the interior. So what was kind of a dead space before becomes this urban, we call this interior street. There'll be libraries, restaurants. We call it an engagement zone. The new floors will be for educational purposes. We actually propose to unite the base and actually have more openings. So this is what it is. This is what it is now, and how we will open the base. And then the second phase continue that. So it becomes still a very solid building, but sitting on a much transparent base. And then this is the backside, and this is what it is now. And we propose to open up all the barriers so you can actually connect directly to the park. And then after this phase, we're studying how to add on to this building. So this is what it looks like after the second phase in the park. And then this is the massing that we're studying. So almost like replicating the same mass to create a larger atrium. So this is the new gallery space. This is the new atrium in connection to the older atrium. So the front, and then this is the back of the building. So we're looking at this kind of all-canned, we're looking at, of course, we looked at Frank Gehry's cladding, and also we saw the inland steel building of SOM after 50, 60 years, and you see some all-canning actually reflects the light quite beautifully. But for us, it's similar to the UCLA project, almost no design. How can we take the grid a bit further, but bring new life into it? The atrium, the gallery spaces, what it was before and what it could be. And we also did a lot of studies in terms of how the park relates to the building in relationship to other museums in Chicago surrounded by parks. So this is the last project that I'll show. This is the Menil Drawing Institute. The Menil is this is the site plan. The Menil was started by John and Dominique de Menil. They were patrons, art collectors and patrons in Houston. On the campus, the first building they constructed was this Rothko Chapel, started by Philip Johnson and Mark Rothko. They split, and Eugene Aubrey, Howard Boundstone finished the building. And then this is the Renzo Piano's first building in the U.S., 1987. In the 90s, he built another building for Cy Twombly, and then there's a Byzantine chapel by Francois de Menil. So this is the first Rothko chapel with the broken obelisks of Bonnet Newman's. And then this is the Menil collection building. This is the Twombly Gallery, and this is the Byzantine Chapel. And then this is an old market building that has been transformed into Dan Flavin's last installation. So this is the kind of campus one is working with, like separated buildings. Most of them are top lit, and some of, like Rothko Chapel is much darker, but most of them are top lit. You have to deal with the outdoor sculptures, Mark DeSevero or Michael Heiser or Tony Smith. But what makes it special are these pre-war houses that the Menil owned, and they kept them, they painted all of them gray with white trims, and some of them they rent them out, some of them they're used for offices. So when you go there, you seem like you suddenly discover, like in Pleasantview, suddenly everything becomes black and white, and you don't find a threshold, but you're suddenly within this museum compound. And also the really majestic oak trees that are there that provides a lot of shade in this whole basin area. Another thing that's quite special is that you always meander around the campus. You walk between houses and then you suddenly discover the museum being there. When we started the project, we looked into the first house. This is the first house that Philip Johnson designed in 1950 for the Menils. The Menils were his first client. That's not himself. So this is pretty much a brick country courtyard house type, but the interior was designed by someone else, by Charles James, a couturier. So it has a very surrealist interior. But what you see in this house, like with tropical plants in the courtyard, actually became the DNA for the museum. So when there's a parallel between what happens between the house and the museum. So when Renzo came and designed the museum, the tropical courtyards, they were all there. So this is the shot right after Rothko Chapel was finished. The museum will be here. But after the Rothko was finished, actually Louis Kahn was hired to design a master plan. You can see Rothko here. He designed this whole master plan, a plan that was never executed because of John de Menil's death and Louis Kahn's death. But when we look through the archives, we begin to see like this, the storage buildings and this type of very gable domestic scale houses. Another project that was not built, it's quite unknown, is a project by Louis Barragan in the 80s that Dominique commissioned him to build a house, a guest house for artists that was never realized. But also, besides the wild colors, but the use of the courtyard is there. That was in Barragan's work. So this is what the campus is now. This is a building that would be torn down. So 3 years ago, David Chipperfield designed a new master plan with new single artist pavilions. This is what's given to us. We have to design a new drawing institute and a new energy building. So we took the footprint and we actually wanted to preserve the trees. So we proposed to build courtyards around the trees, and then we connected the courtyards to form the building. So these are early ideograms. The second thing we wanted to do with the Menils is to create very small and intimately scaled rooms. Similar to the pre-war houses around. A large amount of the collection are surrealist drawings, so they're relatively small and works very well in a domestic setting. And then it's all unified by a roof. It's engineered by Guy Nordenson. These are some of his structural drawings for the courtyards. And so the building is really like 3 courtyards and 3 rooms. The early idea was just to have this thin folded sheet of paper that extends out, that protects the building and then surrounds the landscape. So this is what it is now, and then this is our proposal. So it's under construction, probably 1 more year will be finished. It'll open in 1 more year. So this is the Drawing Institute, and then this is the Energy House. So in concert with the Twombly, which has always been blocked, it forms a new entry from the south. This is like the circulation diagram. We see this as a geographic center of the campus, so a lot of people that come through, even when they didn't want to go to see the museum, we thought they could walk through the museum. 3 volumes, 3 courtyards, unified by a roof. Unlike all the other museums in Menil, which has a lot of natural light, works on paper are very sensitive to natural light, 5-foot candles. So for us, it's about how to bring people in from the bright Texas sun and in a gradual way before you enter into the space, and not have this type of matinee effect when you walk from a bright space to a dark space or vice versa. So I think for us, by utilizing the trees, the natural canopies that are there, developing the courtyards, these are some of the diagrams that shows the intensity of light. you're gradually brought into the exhibition gallery. So facing the park, it seems like a larger building, but actually these two are courtyards. And then in between the Drawing Institute and the Twombly, you form a new garden that was designed by Michael van Valkenburg. So this is the western courtyard. When you walk in, some of the trees are preserved, and then you actually enter into the corner. And then the eastern courtyard on the other side, which is identical, but the landscape is different because it's much closer to the neighboring houses. This is what we call a living room, and it wasn't in the competition program, but we gathered a lot of circulation spaces and grouped them together and form a space because we realized that they need this type of unprogrammed spaces, like old Shaker houses, that these large rooms that they can use for curatorial purposes, so someone can have an exhibition with sculptures being exhibited, or their programs, their fundraising dinners and lectures, that they can all happen there. So it's, in a way, it's a very unprogrammed space. It's always adjacent to the gallery. And then this is the courtyard for the private scholars. There's a drawing room that's adjacent to it, and these are the rooms that have natural light in because the drawings are never there for an extended period of time. And even the curatorial library is treated the same way. So there's this kind of democracy about the front and back house spaces being very similar. That is in Renzo's building as well as in Philip Johnston's house. So when you approach from the main Menil, you can see this is a 60-foot span, and then you can see the courtyard almost like a catcher's mitt that you can walk through, walk around the building, or you can turn. So in some instances, the building looked quite large, like when on the south side facing the park, where we thought the building needed a certain presence, whereas in some angles, it seems much smaller. And basically the cantilever came together and formed for us the memory of this living room space, which is the gable-shaped roof. So after we finished the project, of course, we put it back into the family of plans, like even Philip Johnston's house. I mean, we see it very much between the scale of this house and the museum. And even the cross-section, you know, the height is between a little bit higher than these pre-war houses and lower than the main building. I have a 1-minute film. Should we show it? No, time-wise is okay? Okay, that's it, yeah. So this is a walkthrough of the Drawing Institute. This is coming from the main museum. You see Side Twombly Gallery on your right. So this is all steel. I think the white painted steel also for us is a way to relate to the main building in Twombly. This is when you are at the height of the cat. I don't know why they made it so low. So from the living room, you walk into the gallery. And we try not to have any fixtures in the living room. We try to actually have light reflected from the edge. And then this is the cloister area. On the left is the cloister around the private scholar courtyard. And then you see the drawing room. On the right, you see the salon next to the drawing room. We allowed some windows. Most of the time it will be closed, but I think for us it's more creating this domestic way of light, natural light coming in laterally, as opposed to coming in from the top in more typical institutional spaces. And then this is the drawing room with light that's coming in on both sides, as well as a parasol covered area with natural light coming in the center on the table. And then this is back out into the eastern courtyard, and you can see the back of house spaces there, the conservation and such. And then this is the future park, where there will be one more or two more single artist pavilions, and basically a sculpture park. And that's the end of my lecture. Thank you very much. Should we take any questions? Yeah. Are there any thoughts or comments or questions? Something that offended you deeply? I mean, the house that was an addition to Morpheus's house, we actually invited 2 artists to come. Like Jeff Elrod helped us with the colors of the house, because the 2468 had this primary Rietveld Gestalt colors, and so he came up with the cyan magenta yellow for the rooms and the interior, and then the exterior, it looks darker in the photograph, but it's actually the same color of a photographic gray card. So the most neutral of the shapes of the colors, to bring back the saturation of the other colors. And also Jack Pearson helped us with some of the sculpted stairwell spaces. But I have to say, not as much as we would like, because oftentimes it's self-instigated. The clients don't pay for it, or I think with the new museum renovation and addition projects, we get more chances to work with artists now. I think so. I mean, I tell you, I mean, maybe in a more anecdotal way. I came back, we started the office after I spent 4 years in Switzerland. And I remember with my partner, we're looking through a book on contemporary architecture. And I remember we can tell which is a European project, which is an American project, without looking at the captions, but just looking at how thick the window mullions are. And we realized, like, this is the context we're practicing in, the construction budget is much lower. So we don't want to be enslaved by Pella windows or storefront window systems, So what do? So for us, when we did the Hill House, I think the thing that we begin to do is to be simpler on surfaces and actually push the window in. When we pushed the window in, we actually thought of building cabinetry around it. So when you push the window in, then we thought the window is inside the volume. Then the exterior, the shape of the aperture, is given back to the architects. I think that was the first, when we started to deal with depth inside a building. I think certainly we were reacting to the generation before us, perhaps, of things that people were doing at that time in the Los Angeles context, which is treating the surface like a pattern. So you have a pattern that's gift wrapped around the building, and the windows suddenly become part of that pattern. And we thought, well, it really focuses on the surface. What could the window do that can focus on the depth and actually change if not the weight, the visual weight of the building? So I think that's how we started, like thinking about depth and thickness and heaviness of the buildings. And I think maybe poche is more of an architectural term. And I feel like nowadays I see a lot of practitioners like Erich Matej. They also use poche, but not so much poche as in poche for construction. Like, we're not building with thick stones anymore, or very deep walls or Scottish castles anymore, but they use like utilitarian spaces to buffer larger spaces. And we're not against also building something very light, very thin, but I think that was just the milieu that we're working in, that we start to think about depth and heaviness again. And also maybe in the vault house, when I mentioned that my European colleagues' obsession with a certain type of construction, we use the vault, but we never intended it to be heavy. We always think of it like a kite, something that's light and sitting on the surfaces. So that house has a lot of poche, but then the poche for us works well for us, because then we put all the utility, all the ducts and all the utility, all the structures that are not there in there. I mean, it's very hard. I mean, I look at Frank Gehry's work, and I think he did early Frank Gehry's work, and I think he did it in a right way, where he knows that he cannot compete with his European colleagues. I mean, basically in Europe, it's 3-4 times the construction cost. So not that we can't do it here, but if we do it here, it will always be an uphill battle. Always take a lot more time, take a lot more money, and it's never going to be as good. So I just think for us to understand the context, we have to find some other way to approach it. So, I mean, we looked at Frank Gehry's work, that at the end, he didn't care where the exit sign is. It can be here, it could be slightly off, but certain things he knew that he couldn't control. And I think also we knew in the beginning, there are a lot of things we can't control, like the structure, elegance of the project, we can't. So we decided to cover everything.
How long does it take you to get there?
It varies quite a bit. Like the Hill House, the house, that came almost immediately. because of the constraints are so apparent. We were competing with another architect who designed a house, a Spanish-style house that terraced down, and of the same square footage, 3,600 square feet, and they use 21 caissons. So we knew ours. We used 9 caissons. So when we know that that's a constraint, how can we build that site? That came very quickly. Some projects took a long time, like the vault house took a long time. There's many different iterations that we tried and didn't quite work out, and a lot of focus were put on the front and the back, but the center was never quite satisfactorily resolved. But I think for us that was a strange project where when someone from our team came up with the concept of the vaults, it became very apparent, and then it moves in almost. The project took on a life of its own beyond us. It becomes an engine that drives itself. But I would say it quite varies. And I think in the beginning, when Sharon and myself, when we started, we didn't want to have a particular style. We thought the previous generation is always about a certain signature, and so we try to be very fresh and new for every project when we start a project. So we have very different approaches. But I also have to be self-critical. After 10, 18 years, we look back. Yes, there's certain things that begins to recur again and again. But I think it also has to do with scale. I feel in the beginning we always, like many people in LA, your single-family houses, you really deal with the object. And when the scale got bigger, then we're looking at agglomeration of objects, like 2 or 4 or 6. And then when we start doing UCLA and the Green Line, we realized that the aggregation of objects doesn't form a whole anymore. We need something else. And in those 2 cases, the roof becomes something that helps unify it. And in the museum projects, it's still the beginning, but we're also dealing with the scale in different ways. So I think we try to keep it fresh that way from a design standpoint. I mean, we always have been a little bit slow. We never really feel like we have to be the first one to adopt certain technologies, but we applaud the people who do. And we're adapters. And I think for us, it's we don't want to be in the way that we didn't want to be trapped by a certain window. We didn't also want to be trapped by a certain technique. Do you know the movie Adaptation with Spike Jonze and the 2 Nicolas Cage? I love that digital technology. That at the end, it's not about seeing 2 Nicolas Cage on stage anymore. That technology is just like hidden, invisible, and then it's just about acting. And I like to see architecture that way too. I think that's. I mean, there's certain colleagues of mine that are very forefront about certain things, but I think at the end, what matters is that how it benefits the larger community, which I consider myself part of. Like Otto von Eyck is a very important figure for me in my own education. I read a lot about what he wrote, and I remember there was a quote by him where he said, I've heard that in a time of change, one should not be a prisoner of tradition. This is during the post-war period. And then he said, but in my view, an architect should not be a prisoner at all, and at no time should he or she be a prisoner to change. And it really stuck with me. I think it's something, when I talked about in the beginning, the importance of history, I feel like the time where we have to nullify something to move somewhere else is over. I feel like this is a time where we have the benefit of hindsight. We can benefit from a lot of intelligence that are built before us. And I think at the end, we work on collages because it's also something that is very slow, very still, because we have to use 3D modeling to get into a project. I mean, physical modeling, which is a very antiquated way, but we still think there's something about the material resistance of the model that a rendering doesn't do for us. A computer modeling helps us get inside the project that physical models doesn't. But thanks again for coming. Thanks.